You're next! Achilles!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Mecha and Monster Mondays. Today, we'll be covering the 1989 or 1990, depending on when the actual release of this film really was, mecha classic, Robot Jox. And to talk about the film, I have a very special guest with me here today.
Hello. It's good to be here. My name is Saoirse. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing?
Uh, and I would now, before we get into the big discussion of the film, I want to just cover like brief production history. For one, this film, directed by Stuart Gordon, was first conceived after he was initially exposed to the Transformers franchise, which when you watch this film, knowing that is kind of an odd thing because it's like, yeah, you can see it, but like it goes very much off the deep end from just the base point of like, oh man, I wonder if I did Transformers. Um, it was originally considered too expensive for Empire Pictures during the time of its conception, but it was later given funding after a stop motion demo reel was created. And I'd say what's most notable about the production is that there was a lot of creative clashing, as there is with the robots in the film, with co-writer Joe Haldeman. In terms of like the tone of the film, not specifically like plot points, but more so like the tone, as Haldeman was more interested in creating kind of a serious, specifically dystopian tone, whereas Stuart Gordon was leaning more towards kind of the campy kind of Saturday morning cartoon-esque aesthetic to it. Uh, and the film was shot in Rome, and most notably, the robot designs were done by a Mr. Ron Cobb. But that's pretty much all in terms of production. This might be like the shortest production part of the episode of any of the episodes I've done so far, which then leads me to probably my most interested part of the episode, which is to ask you, Saoirse, about why choose this film, and more specifically your relation to Stuart Gordon as a director, because that was sort of
Totally.
what we talked about beforehand.
Yeah, well, just another interesting like production aspect of this film is obviously
Mm.
like as you mentioned Empire Pictures, which is Charles Band's company, who I think is probably most famous for the Puppet Master franchise.
Mm.
Uh, Robot, you mentioned that like they thought it'd be too expensive. Obviously, Robot Jox didn't get much of a release. Um,
Yeah.
so it turned out to be so expensive, it pretty much bankrupted the company, which is why you stopped getting Empire Pictures.
Yeah, I was gonna say is like I remember when I was looking this up, I was like, oh man, I don't know why I've never heard of Empire Pictures before. And then at some point when I was doing the research, I read that aspect of it, was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
probably why.
Well, like all of Stuart Gordon's movies up until that point had been with Empire Pictures, so like Reanimator and then From Beyond, going through the rest of his Lovecraft adaptations. In fact, Stuart Gordon with Charles Band directed a movie that is effectively a Puppet Master movie, but like good, called
Oh,
called Dolls, which is one of his more
oh.
famous pictures, which is really good. I really like that film.
Hmm.
Um, he has this movie. I can't quite remember the name off the top of my head. I think it might be called like Dungeon Creature or something like that. I'm gonna quickly look it up.
Yeah, I
Um,
was gonna say it's like I distinctly remember hearing about dolls because like I think it was either something that has to do with not specifically like Stuart Gordon, but like some aspect of production that was kind of notable, like visual effects or something like that. But
sure,
uh yeah, I've only really seen one other Stuart Gordon film, which was Reanimator. And
sure, yeah.
I I'm interested in eventually rewatching that because I watched that in my what I would describe as like cinema snob era, where it's like this movie has bad acting and it's cheesy and it's bad, and I had no nuance of like tone.
It's interesting you say that because Reanimator won the jury prize at Cannes.
Really?
Um, yeah,
Huh. Fu-
like it's
Funny that.
yeah. I think what if like you get it, then you can see what happens because like it is essentially a black comedy of transgression.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that plays well to like a Cannes audience, especially like let's say, especially in what like the early 80s, like you're going in there every day and you're seeing another black and white Eastern European movie, which is like I love those, but like someone gives you Jeffrey Combs running around with the severed head that's like talking to him, like you're gonna remember it more, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like that at least is somewhat unique in that sense. And also, if I'm being honest, when I first watched Reanimator, I did not realize that it was supposed to be sort of a black comedy because again, I was probably like 15 and didn't know any better. So I would have been like, is this supposed to be scary? Man, this is so silly. And it's I'd probably I don't know if I wrote a review at the time, but if I looked at it now, I'd probably be like, God, I hate you.
Yeah, I didn't like Reanimate when I first watched it either for like I think similar reasons. Like this is probably a good way to get into my relationship with Stuart Gordon to actually answer your question.
Mm.
Uh, but like so I discovered Stuart Gordon thanks to a company you may have heard of called Red Letter Media. Um
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say it's like I forgot that they did a couple episodes on his stuff.
yeah, when I was like 15 or 16, I think, which probably makes me feel really old. It probably makes like those guys feel even older than they probably do. They
Uh,
put out this review double feature of Reanimator and From Beyond episode. And I watched it and I was like, how have I not I'd heard of Reanimator through an early Mark Kermode video blog actually, but that's
mm,
beside the point. All I knew is that he'd mentioned it in an offhand comment once about how to do Lovecraft well on screen.
mm.
Um, and so they did this double feature, and I was like, how have I not seen these movies before? Had I not know more about it? These look really cool. So I rented, like Netflix had moved away from DVD rentals, but there was another company that basically did like postage DVD rentals. So I got all of my friends round in my friend's really bare apartment, and I got my shitty laptop with my shitty laptop speakers on in front of us, and we double billed Reanimator and From Beyond. And we all really hated Reanimator. I think probably that's not an ideal situation to watch Reanimator. If you're watching it with friends
Uh,
and you want it on the biggest screen possible.
mhm.
Uh, but we all really loved From Beyond, and that is still my favorite Stuart Gordon film. Mainly because like Reanimator is kind of fun in that it's scrappy and
Mhm.
the effects aren't like amazing, and that sort of heightens the comedic tone of it. Of course, like Stuart
Yeah.
Gordon came out of really low budget theater before movies,
Mhm.
doing sort of equally transgressive stuff in the Chicago and Milwaukee areas.
Mhm.
Sort of that area is, and he famously sort of got shut down by the police a couple of times.
Oh,
He was working,
really?
yeah, well, like he was doing transgressive theater in the 70s.
Oh, yeah. I guess. Yeah. I was gonna say it's like
Yeah,
it was kind of before people were like, wait, we kind of know what this is now. It's not really that big of a deal.
yeah, exactly. And like, he famously actually did like a musical stage adaptation of Reanimator later in his career, and I think that
Oh,
the video
wow.
that exists, yeah, and the video that exists of that gives you, I think, some sort of insight into what he does in theater.
Mm.
Um, like the musical numbers is just a piano, is very like high school version. It's a very community theater, Little Shop of Horrors
Oh,
energy.
I
I
see.
say that as someone who performed the legs of Audrey 2 in a local theater production of Little Shop of Horrors.
That's awesome. Man, I kind of wish I still did some theater stuff. That sounds like that would be really fun.
It was really fun, but it's a different energy to the movie. Um,
Yeah. I was gonna say it's like if nothing else, actually, like thinking about it, Reanimator does seem like something that is kind of perfect material for like a sort of heightened kind of campy musical adaptation because like it has a lot of the a feel of something like that already while not explicitly being so. Because like I'm trying to think of like other examples of like things that weren't initially musicals. Well, I mean, like Little Shop of Horrors you mentioned, and that's kind of sort of a good example, I guess, where it has that kind of heightened campy tone. But no, I kind of am interested to see what that's like because I feel like that would be kind of fun. I wonder if it's
Yeah.
the cast recording is on Spotify.
I think something important to remember is actually like the original Little Shop of Horrors Roger Corman movie is also a comedy.
Mm.
Like it's famously like the Dick Miller character, his bit is that he snacks on flowers, and that's why
Oh,
he's in the flower shop.
yeah.
It's a weird bit. And like famously they shot in, like 2 days so Roger Corman could win a bet because they had some sets left over from a
Uh,
bucket of blood, I think.
yeah.
Anyway, I am digressing. But
That
that's
is
fine.
interesting though. I Roger
I have
Corman's so silly sometimes.
I have worked on movies that have had a week for principal shooting to make a
Mm.
whole movie. I've worked on 3 or 4 movies like that, and I can't imagine like that's already like brain meltingly difficult. I can't imagine what 2 days would be
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I can also attest to that as someone who has been on like a couple of like just short films that's not even like feature length stuff, and it's
Mhm.
like it took 2 whole days to do like a scene.
Yeah. Oh my God. We had honestly the first movie I ever worked on, we had because the producers had messed up location booking.
Mm.
So we discovered on our last day in our first location, we had basically that day to make 19 and a half pages.
Hmm.
We made that
Yeah,
day somehow. But it was not professional.
yeah.
What we did to make that day.
I was gonna say it's like not only is does that not sound professional, but that sounds like genuinely like impossible almost. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, it was tough. But like very similar to Roger Corman, as a film producer more than a film director, Stuart Gordon fell in with Charles Band, in making the Reanimator movie, and also Brian Yuzna, who produced that movie. And
mm.
those two influences, I think, really define his filmmaking career. Uh, Brian Yuzna is someone who takes things and turns them into Brian Yuzna movies.
Ah.
Anyone who has seen Society or Faust, I think.
Oh, he did those. I did not know about that.
Yeah, well, he directed those. He directed those movies, Brian Yuzna, and I think anyone who has seen those two films can attest to the sensibilities that might make him and Stuart Gordon such compatible filmmaking people.
Yeah, actually, like I have not seen Society, but I do know quite a bit about it, and like knowing that they work together closely, that makes a lot of sense now thinking
Yeah,
about it.
to the extent that Brian Yuzna also directed the sequels to Reanimator as well.
Oh,
Like very closely knit. To the extent that I think Brian Yuzna would think of Reanimator more as a Brian Yuzna film, which I don't think is quite accurate.
yeah.
Uh, but like From Beyond is a much more professional production. It's less funny.
Mm.
It's equally transgressive. Um, like the jokes aren't jokes. If you are laughing, it's because you can't quite comprehend what you're seeing.
Yeah, is like it's like kind of a breakdown of like I'm not even sure what is happening anymore, so it's kind of more just out of like some semblance of reaction to anything happening at the moment.
Watching From Beyond is very much like the famous GIF from Veep,
Oh,
where Julie Louis-Dreyfus just turns away. It's like, what the fuck?
yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of a you're just like I don't even know what's going on. It's kind of funny. I watched something sort of like that fairly recently, but it's more so not in like the absolute like I have no idea what's going on, but it's just like just general like man something's off about this. So it's kind of funny that like I know exactly what you mean by that sort of feeling though.
What
Like
was what thing are you referring to?
it was a movie called Messiah of Evil, and is ostensibly like a very long like this vibe is off. It is a feature length vibe off moment.
I've been recommended that film many times.
I think you would really really like it. I feel like it's something that well I always say like I think it's right up your alley, but then I'm always like, I don't want to like completely assume, but like it does
Sure.
have the trappings of a Saoirse classic.
I appreciate that. Uh like I would say if you're like a fan of the Phantasm franchise, From Beyond is probably a good companion piece. But like yeah, but he so obviously from that, like he keeps working with Charles Band and Empire Pictures, leads him on to like Castle Freak was a film I was trying to think of earlier, which
Mm.
is nominally a Lovecraft adaptation. Stuart Gordon is very loose with his Lovecraft adaptations. From Beyond, like it's literally the pre-credit sequence. It's a Lovecraft short story, and then he just
Hmm.
leaps off from there. In the original short story of Reanimator, which I have read, there isn't even a female character.
Oh.
Uh,
Huh.
like Barbara Crampton's character in Reanimator is entirely a construct for the movie.
Ah, I see. Hmm.
Yeah, which makes certain scenes more questionable, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It is like aspects of Barbara Crampton's character that film I do still kind of remember, and I'm just like, why was that there? What was that
Yeah.
about? What was that about?
um yeah, so like but like Castle Freak, basically Charles Band and Stuart Gordon were having a meeting, and Charles Band had a poster that had mocked up for like a pitch, like a vibes pitch. It
Hmm.
didn't have a movie attached, but it mocked up a poster basically to be like, this is the kind of thing we want to make. And it said Castle Freak on it. And Stuart Gordon said, do you have a script for that? And Charles Band said, no, but you can make it if you can come up with the story if you use the name, because it will obviously like sell tickets.
Mhm.
Um, and it's actually like a pretty good movie. It's fairly straight for Stuart Gordon. But then I find Robot Jox.
Yep.
You're telling me that Stuart Gordon is making a big, like, the kind of movie that I would have made if I was 7, and you gave me big mech toys and I smashed them together. You're telling me that he made that movie. And he did.
He very much did, and it's so funny to me because like if I was like studio executive or something like that, I don't think I would have ever in a million years been like Stuart Gordon, person who has done like several of like iterations of Lovecraft adaptations. Let's give him the reins for a like PG mech movie, like
Like,
PG
you
rated mech
say that.
movie.
You say that, but like this film is so totally weird. Like
Yeah.
it feels like uh, Transformers is such a great tonal comparison. It feels like an episode of the Transformers cartoons
Mhm.
until certain things happen,
Yeah.
and then it's like a Paul Verhoeven movie, and then we're back to the Saturday morning cartoon. It's so weird.
It's so weird. It's so weird to me because, like, I mean, you have your opening sequence that's just kind of like a kind of classic setup for a film type of this type where it's like, the villain's introduced, he steps on the guy and he goes like, I'll see, I'm gonna find you, get you Achilles, and then it does like the echo
Right.
thing. And then like in the next scene when the actual fight happens, it's like, oh yeah, this robot falling over caused like an instance of like mass murder, and
It's
it's just
so bleak. It's so bleak,
it
and
really is. It's
what I
just bizarre though.
what I love about that opening sequence is that it makes you think you're about to watch a normal movie. The panning across the dead robots, like the use of scale in this movie is actually incredible.
Yeah,
Uh, I've watched a
honestly.
few behind the scenes things that get into how they did that, and it's interesting, and I can get onto that. But like the panning across the snowy forest with the dead like carcass of a robot. It's like this is like what would happen if like early Tarkovsky made a mech movie, like shots like
Yeah.
that. Snowy lands. It's so good and pretty.
Yeah, and it's like it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, yeah, you could if you looked close enough, maybe you could see yeah, find the seams of it, but like it does look really like intricate and well designed in such a way where it feels like believable. And like that's one thing I kind of do quite enjoy about like this being like a pre-CGI like attempt at a mech film is that like because of the fact that it's like raw materials of like massive kind of like miniature sets or stop motion, you get like the jankiness of the robots that you don't really get in like a lot of CG like stuff. It looks it's wonderfully kind of like brittle and kind of like imperfect in a way that like makes it more real. But then yeah, like this like perfect setup is there. And then you get like or then proceed to like learn more and more about this universe that you makes you go like, hey, something's off about this sci-fi world.
Mm-hmm. Like when it cuts back to the like we already know that they're growing like test tube people, which is a weird subplot for a movie like this. But
Oh
like then
God,
when
yeah.
yeah, but then when they come back to like the cityscape, like when Achilles is going to see his family, and the first thing you see of the city is this weird advert to promote having kids. It,
Yeah.
it it's like is very Paul Verhoeven. And I think the movie could have actually done with a bit more of that aspect to it. Like if it was very like sprinkled in.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's kind of more just sort of like window dressing at times, even though there's a bit more potent meaning behind it.
yeah. Also, amazing Jeffrey Combs cameo in our first vision of the
Oh, really?
cityscape. He's like one of the two people betting on the fight between Achilles
Oh,
and the Russian guy at the beginning.
yeah, that makes sense actually. I probably would have noticed it if I was like thinking about that beforehand, but yeah, no, I think that does sound right.
It's like Quentin Tarantino can't make a movie without Sam Jackson. Joe Dante cannot make a movie without Dick Miller. Stuart Gordon cannot make a movie without Jeffrey Combs. It's impossible.
It is a constant and will continue to be so throughout his career.
Exactly.
But
Maybe to the
God,
detriment of both of their careers to different extents.
eh,
Uh,
you just got to keep to the bit, you know.
exactly. But yeah, like we see this advert, it just says like prenatal and this really 80s kind of advert of this woman holding up her kid. And he's just walking past and it's like, is this part of this world? Um, and I actually think part of the reason the movie is interesting is I think Stuart Gordon is more interested in that than the
Mhm.
robots fighting each other. Uh, like this movie doesn't have a lot of
Mhm.
substance, but what substance it does have is consistent with the rest of his science fiction career, at least.
Mhm.
Movies like Reanimator and From Beyond. Um, and I think it even ties into the ending where you've waited an hour for the robots to fight again, and now they're fighting, and you get to the end, and they're now they've ditched the robots and they're
Yeah.
fighting because I think Stuart Gordon does care that much about the robots, I think.
No, I
Uh,
was gonna say it feels like it's almost kind of I'd almost describe it as like an inverse of Michael Bay, but like with the same kind of nihilism behind it, where it's like the destruction of these robots is not really presented in a way that's supposed to be like full on entertaining. It's just kind of like cynical in the way that it's like, yeah, these are basically used to ostensibly decide on massive world shaping kind of like decisions
yeah,
and yeah, and then like during like the big fight, escalates to chainsaw dick and then like falls from there to just two dudes fighting with like big metal rods. And it's
yeah,
just so funny to me like thinking about that because like for one, that means like the last 10 minutes of the movie, it's like there's already been a decision on who won the fight, and yet they're just still going because they hate each other that much
yeah.
during the
Like
moment.
So, like, for the audience who might not have seen it, the premise of this movie is war is outlawed. They're banned war. Like, I'm not sure how they're enforcing that, but they've outlawed war. Um, and basically they have these big mech fights because it's very like 1984 geocontinent stuff. It's basically Russians versus Americans, and they're halves of the world that they've taken over. So I think does also play into the nihilism a bit. This movie is very like Rocky Four anti-Russian, but it
Yeah,
is very it acknowledges the fact that America maybe is doing a lot of the same stuff in
yeah.
the end. And like, I mean, the I don't want to spoil it too much for anyone who's listening and maybe hasn't seen it, but like the it's satirical of Cold War tensions in some of the twists and turns that the story takes as it goes on. Like maybe some of the more cartoonishly American guys who maybe have a cartoonishly big cowboy hat are maybe
Oh,
less trustworthy than you might think. And like the Japanese guy is maybe more trustworthy than you might think.
yeah. It's like what one. So there's two things I want to say. Also, kind of adding on to that. One, not especially related, but like we have a character who is kind of like a stereotypical Russian villain, but like I remember hearing a line, and I'm hoping I remember this correctly, that said that he was born in Tucson, Arizona.
I've watched an interview with him and he sounds like it. And like he's been in lots and lots of movies. He was in like Heaven's Gate. I literally had this up right before we got on this. But this is a guy called I think Paul Koslow, if I got that right.
Oh,
Um
hmm.
I forgot that I really hope I got that right. Yeah. So Alexander, played by this guy called Paul Koslow, who's in Heaven's Gate, Vanishing Point, and The Amiga Man, and just lots of classic American films. And in the
Hmm.
interview, he sounds very American.
Yeah,
Um,
but
he apparently loved working on this movie. Like he had a great time.
yeah, I just think it's funny that like even in the canon of the story, he is supposedly born in Tucson, Arizona, yet he has the most hilariously over the top Russian accent like possible.
Achilles.
Achilles, and then it just like echoes for like two more seconds.
I more than that, I love the way he says Achilles when he like walks up to him in the first scene in the bar.
Yes, yes.
So nasty. He's like, Achilles, you coward.
He's such a like that was the thing I didn't expect when I first watched this is like the main dude is kind of just, some guy basically. Like there's nothing particularly like interesting about him, but like the villain is such a wonderfully like devilish douchebag, and I think he's such a fun villain.
He's so like if this was a pantomime, you would hiss when he comes on stage. He chews the scenery. He is having a great time. He is so hateable. Like every choice the writers make was like, how can we like make it seem like he's like twisting your ear like a big brother,
Yeah,
like
like he'd be like the kind of like if he had a mustache he would twirl it
yeah,
type of
yeah.
evil. And my second thing I wanted to add to what you previously talked about is the kind of the American like essentially like the assistant to like the main guy who is like cartoonishly like Texas. The only thing I can say is I love him, but I wish he was played by Emmett Walsh. I feel like he would be perfect for that.
Yes. Oh my God. See, I was gonna say he would be great if he was played by John Goodman. And then when you said that, I remembered Raising Arizona because they're both in that movie.
Yeah,
Um, and if you as at home haven't seen Raising Arizona, you should correct that straight away.
you should. And as an Arizonan myself, I can attest to this. Uh, but it is the thing I kind of just love about like this specific type of dystopian world is like it's almost kind of a genre onto itself, whereas like big like important world decisions are decided by basically sports because
Mhm.
like I this is a slightly off topic, but like still somewhat on topic. A few months back, I watched a film series for research called Zombies, which is a trilogy of not very good Disney TV channel movies that are essentially about zombies becoming like regular people, but are essentially like second class citizens. And by the third film, one of the plot points is that basically the decision on whether to apply segregation laws for said zombies is decided by a fucking football game. And I could not think of anything else while I was watching this film other than like, wait, this is just the same plot point that zombies had.
Oh my God, that's so funny. But like dystopian extreme sports movies is also like a subgenre unto
Hmm.
itself. I feel like this owes a lot to like Rollerball, the James Caan movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I'm not sure which came first, but Running Man has very similar vibes.
I think Running Man came first, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Don't
but
quote me
like
on that though.
the sort of dystopian subgenre of like I mean, like the Hunger Games or something to all of these movies, where it's like in this dystopia, we have an extreme sport that serves as like a distraction to the public
Hmm.
from sort of the dystopian aspects of it. Like Running Man is like it's probably not the first one, but it's definitely like the one that definitively set out the template for the genre. I don't know if I said Running Man, I meant Rollerball. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like both of those are kind of interchangeable in some way because like I think Running Man was like a Stephen King thing, wasn't it?
yeah, released under his pseudonym, I think.
Ah, I was gonna say it's like you could attest like Running Man to like more so like in the literature like Escape and Rollerball Pride more to like films since I don't think Rollerball or was it Rollerball or no it's Rollerball
Yeah.
uh this probably kind of created sort of like the visual language of like that sort of thing probably in like films, but it's just kind of funny to sort of see that blown up into like now we're just having ostensibly like the world's biggest rock'em sock'em robot session to like isn't the plot point something like deciding on like who gets land development of Alaska ostensibly.
Yeah, so the opening battle is to decide Alaska, and basically they've been saving Achilles because he's the best of his generation of Robot Jox, which is the name of the people who get in the robots. It is very Pacific Rim, or rather Pacific Rim is very this.
Yeah,
Uh, but like, so you have your Robot Jocks who get in and control the robot, very like very Evangelian as well, if I can go there.
yeah.
Uh,
I was gonna say it's like it is because of how early of a film this is in the genre. It does have like a lot of possible influence, but it is just funny because like we have had so many like more in-depth equivalents.
the fact
Now
that
it's
Hideo
just like
Anno has probably seen this movie
yeah,
as like a kid, which probably seeded the germ that became Evangelion, is mad, just mad.
Anno watches it at 6 years old. He's like, I'm gonna make this the most fucking existentially traumatizing thing ever.
Like, yeah, literally. God. But yeah, I'm trying to stay like on one track because I have so much to say about Stuart Gordon, this movie, but like where was I going with this? Right, yeah. So they've been saving Achilles for the battle for Alaska because he is the best of his generation, and as a result, this guy, Alexei, has killed 9 robot jocks in a row.
Yeah, he's
And it's
like
like,
the unstoppable force versus immovable object scenario.
yeah, it is very Rocky Four. Um,
Yeah,
but and so they go for Battle for Alaska, and because they break the rules and have a projectile missile in the game, there are these spectators who they're called bleacher bums, and this guy gets up from his dying robot jock to block the fist going straight for the audience. And as a result, 300 people die. And it's shown really, really graphically.
Yeah, it is like in a surprising amount of detail, and it's not so much like this. There's no like, oh, they don't show it, so it didn't happen sort of deal. It's like, nah, they show it and say it outright
Mm-hmm.
that 300 people like died as a result of this, and as a result, that becomes like a major plot point for most of the rest of the film.
Yeah, I felt like it was a really Stuart Gordon touch to be really graphic and violent and really disturbing with it. Like I could show it to my kids and they would really enjoy that movie, and then I'd have to turn it off.
Yeah,
Uh, like it's so graphic and violent, but as a result of that, they say you've drawn your match. We're going to have to replay it, but he's reached the end of his obligatory contract of 10 games. So your man says, I'm gonna stop.
mhm.
But everyone thinks they're raising these test tube babies to fight in their place, and everyone thinks they're not as good. So everyone's saying you're letting your country down, letting them win. And for what? You're a coward, right? And he has to live with that for a good portion of the movie. But what do you know? He falls in love with one of the test tube babies, and they're selected to
Yeah.
fight. And he's like,
Of course it's the one that he falls in love with also. It's like is like kind of obvious from like the get-go that's probably gonna happen. And
"Mhm.
also, side note, I really like I is her name is Athena, by the way. I really like her a lot because
Yeah,
she
she's great."
she starts off as like, I gotta stay stay by the rules, play by the book, and then by the end she's like, fuck it. I hate all of you.
Yeah.
Just wrecks everything.
What I thought was really like I think they made it from the really clear from the off that he's more in lust with her than love, because
Yeah.
incredibly misogynistic and lecherous about this woman from the first minute we see her. It's kind of uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
then she has some of the most like objectionable thoughts about humanity I have heard a sympathetic character in a movie say for a very long time. It's
Yeah.
very, very cynical. But then as soon as it's selected for her to fight the thing, he's like, I have to go back. I
I've got to go
it's
back. Uh, I've like I'm trying to even remember like how he talk is like I gotta go back. Is there's nothing discernible about this main character.
he has the kind of face where I looked at him and I thought, wow, I've seen this guy in like 100 movies before. And I looked him up and he's barely been in anything. He is such a generic face. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, but I feel like the graphicness of the violence, to circle back around, was really important because without it, it doesn't really make sense why he quits. But
Mhm.
you see how horrible and violent it is, and then he's like, I can't risk doing that again. And you're like, the correct opinion, the correct choice.
Yeah. And it's such an odd kind of like plot point for something that's kind of like setting itself up as like kind of like classic fighting robot story is like the
Mhm.
fact that it's like a lot of the plot is sort of like him having to reconcile with the fact that like yes he has like this level of authority by being a robot jox and like fighting for like the for essentially like land disputes to basically stop war, but the fact that war is ended does not mean that like just senseless death by massive kind of like forces is not still happening in some way. It's just it's happened in a more like, oh, this was not supposed to happen sort of way, but it's like you brought like 500 people
Yeah.
into a massive ring with two massive robots. What did you think would happen?
It's not only 500 people, there's probably 500 people in like that bleacher, but there's three bleachers. There's a
Mhm.
possible body count of 1.5K.
Yeah, ostensibly.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Um, but the test tube babies things brings me into where I think Stuart Gordon has stuff to say with this movie. Obviously, there's like political satire happening, which I think probably comes as much from the screenwriter as anything. But
Mhm.
like Stuart Gordon, as a filmmaker and a storyteller, is I think interested in permutations of fate
Mm.
in a way. Like I think this particularly prevalent with the discussions of AI happening in the world at the minute and what could possibly happen with that. Because I feel like that when the modern iteration of what AI is in popular consciousness happened, the I think response from it was very much like, I think this is dumb, or I think this could revolutionize the planet, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of like me and my friends, right? A lot of us have been getting really creepy WhatsApp messages that are obviously AI generated from like sold data of our text messages.
Yeah. Yeah. Like and stuff along those lines where it's like messages that are it's like why would you get this message for anything that has anything to do with you? Because it's like, oh, messages pertaining to like packages or something like that that you know that you didn't buy or something like that. It's like why make this
Like,
ostensibly?
give two examples, right? My friend Millie has been WhatsApping her doctor about an upcoming appointment. She gets a scam text message being like, "We wanted to make your appointment earlier. Send these details for confirmation."
Oh.
And with me, right, I got a text message literally today where the opening word was like a pet name I've been using for the person I'm seeing.
Mm. Yeah,
And
it's
it's
like
like
specific information to you kind of thing.
it's like obvious cases, right? Someone didn't write this message because they would have seen these things and realized they're stupid.
Yeah.
What happened was they WhatsApp sold the data, including our text histories, and someone who bought the data fed it into a large language learning model or an AI generator or something so that they could try and generate a message that would look normal to us specifically.
Mhm.
And that's a version, that's a permeabilities what can be done with AI that no one was ever, I think, really going to predict. And I think Stuart Gordon is interested in that aspect of science. I
Yeah.
think he's really cynical about technological innovation. Like, so when it comes to From Beyond, we have got this portal that can stimulate this random part of our brain to help us see other dimensions that aren't there.
Mhm.
And his response to that is, we have no idea what is on the other side. Like there are 100 permutations of what that could be.
Yeah.
Uh, when it comes to Reanimator, like the central conflict of that movie is a guy who thinks death is it, to a guy who thinks that we can bring life back after brain death.
Yeah,
But
kind of classic Frankenstein sort of thing.
Stuart Gordon says there are 100 steps in between, and none of them are good.
Yeah. And in this film there is a kind of that and maybe a bit more sillier of a sense, but still in that same kind of vein regardless, I think.
Yes, like in his approach to the big robots, he no good comes of it. And I had this really clearly in my mind when I watched it the other day, but I feel like his approach, especially to like the test tube babies, is actually quite frightening.
Hmm.
Because from their perspective, they don't because they're not raised in a society. They are grown in a test tube to fight.
Yeah.
He sees that as stripping them of their humanity through the lack of interaction with society, through um simply having a dedicated reason to exist. Like I think the only way you could eliminate the problem Stuart Gordon brings up in this movie with that idea would be to never tell one of these beings what they are.
Yeah. Just flat out not even give them anything to sort of know about that.
Because it's we form our morality system through being raised in a culture, being raised in a family, through not actually having a purpose and then having to self-define one.
Mhm.
In the context of all of those other things. But these guys are created knowing why they're on this planet, and it's to murder.
Yeah, like that is literally their sole intention of creation, even by the person who created them, is like, I built you to I built you to maneuver a killing machine as well as possible. And that is ostensibly it. There is no other use for you outside of that.
Thinking about it, that was probably the like aspect of this movie that lives the most in Evangelion.
Honestly, yeah, because like I kind of almost see it as like the sort of like Rei Anami sort of like plot line of like a character who is just so completely like socially like non-existent because like their only purpose in life was to get in the robot ostensibly. And like it is kind of funny comparing the two because like with like Rei and Evangelion is kind of like that's never really something that particularly changes that much besides her just like occasionally being like, oh wow, I guess I really was made to only like pilot a robot. Whereas in here we have Athena who has probably like the most cohesive of an arc in this entire film, despite like it kind of just her kind of just disappearing by the end of the film completely, which is, when a major plot line happens where she, as we talked about, she is chosen to pilot the Robot Jox to fight the villain in the film, and main character comes back because like I can't let this happen to her, you know and that like your purpose has been fulfilled is just like immediately like snatched from her, and her
Mhm.
response is like, I think I now know that my purpose in the first place was kind of dumb and not really particularly like gratifying whatsoever, so I'm just gonna wreck this shit as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, like her arc at the beginning is we have this greatest fighter of all time, and she's trying to find what makes him special. And it's these deeply human, intangible things. They have this really excellent scene where he's trying to define why he's good at fighting. And it's stuff that if you never had to choose this, if you never had to define it for yourself, you never can understand.
Yeah.
If you were to create, like, let's take a more real life example, right? Let's say you created in a test tube the perfect footballer, soccer player, right?
Yeah.
And they had lunch with Lionel Messi, right?
Yeah.
Or Neymar, one of the really famous South American footballers whose whole story revolves around playing football in backstreet slums or whatever, and then like there's this Argentinian centre back who plays for the team I support, right?
Mhm.
His dad, one of his parents told the story. It's like as soon as he got his first professional contract, he called his parents and was like, "Choose what house you want. I'm gonna buy it for you."
Yeah, like that type of sort of like startup story.
Yeah, like, and that's like the really like basic version, but like the most simplified version. But every footballer in the world, even ones who come from more privileged backgrounds, have to find that drive within themselves for some reason. But you get this robot to sit them down, they are never going to understand that.
Yeah.
And that is laid out in this scene between Athena and Achilles. He's talking in abstracts, and she's like, but like, what do you do that makes you
Yeah.
good? And he's like, I am just me.
Yeah, it's like it is kind of like he can't really like discern necessarily like the specific things he does besides the fact of just his own ability and just sheer will to do it.
Yeah.
And it is probably like the most nuanced scene in terms of like the character work in the film because like again like main character is especially just some guy, but like during that moment like that actually is kind of a benefit because the fact that he is just some guy works in the moment because yeah, there's nothing particularly special about him in that moment other than yeah, he's just like I find the will to do so to kind of keep doing this, which I think is kind of interesting when I think about like the ending where like even through just like the most just ridiculously long and painful like fighting with like metal rods is kind of just a case of like the sheer will to keep doing this despite how ridiculous it becomes.
Yeah, totally. What I really love about that ending scene is it's so cheesy, but the bit where he says to Alexei, like, we can live, and he's like, yeah, I can live and you die. And then he's like, no, we can both live.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that gets right to the heart of the way Stuart Gordon views the world as a filmmaker is like a third way. And I think in a lot of his movies, that is shown through horrible violence. The third way is you didn't see the third way and now it's going to kill you. But that doesn't like necessarily have to be it. Like,
Mhm.
imagine if the guys in Reanimator understood what would happen if they did what they did before they went into it, then you can probably use that for some good thing.
Yeah, yeah, like be able to get use the knowledge that they had at that point by the end and do something that could be more of use for both them and for society. And I think it's kind of interesting that ending bit because yeah, it's like, and I think it's partially because Achilles has like the moment with, you know, the audience that like gets like horribly injured and murdered and near the beginning of the film where he has kind of the foresight to realize like no, the sanctity of life is more important than whatever bullshit that we're like fighting for to begin with because like when we were talking about like the kind of cynical way that like Stuart Gordon views the world, I think it's kind of interesting that like these characters only really come to like their sense of humanity once they are removed from the robots, from any kind of machinery, when they're just two dudes fisticuffs in the middle of the desert. It's like it kind of brings them back to like that sense of like, okay, yeah, they're like because like I think another element of the film that's sort of interesting that is kind of a constant theme with like mech stuff that I've talked about before is like that disconnect of like military escalation from like the idea of individual humanity, even though in a mech storyline, it is kind of in a lot of ways about individuals in some way. So it is kind of interesting that it's like in this case, they do literally have to be like ripped from their robots before they can even come to understand that.
That's such an astute point. I think it's interesting you say that because this is the week that I think it was last week actually that the creator came out in the UK.
Mm.
The director of whom went to my film school, by the way.
Ooh.
Uh, yeah,
Dang, I
that's
wish Gareth Evans would meet my school.
it was really funny because the when he came to do a Q&A the year I was there, or rather like the year he came to there because I was there for 3 years, it was a bachelor's degree. Um, Everyone asked him about Rogue One, which is, I think, a sore topic for him, maybe.
Maybe just a little bit. Yeah.
But I get away from myself because I haven't seen the creator yet. I really want to see it because even though I hear like lukewarm things, I want to support big, ambitious, original science fiction. Um, because if that gets supported, they'll make more of it.
Yeah.
And I'm so done with everything being called the same thing,
Yeah.
or rather, the same one of the same seven things. Um, but anyway, um, pushing forward to make my point. Um, one of the things I've really heard coming out of this movie is that it very much is about it essentially sees world politics as a net negative force. And like I've heard a lot of people say that it comes across very anti-USA because the US soldiers are very much the antagonists to the story. But from what I've heard, they're not the villains. They are the antagonists. The villains is the machinations of world politics that then motivates the army to interrupt the personal journey that the characters are having. And I feel like every single mech film or big dumb monster movie I've seen treads along similar lines. Like people are trying to have their personal journeys told through big thing. Like part of the reason Godzilla really works and other mech films really works is people are small, but our emotions are really big.
Yeah.
So monsters and mechs are really good at representing those big emotions because they are so much bigger than us.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
a scale.
Yeah, and then it's the minutiae of politics again the way. Like Godzilla, especially like the American stuff where it's less detached from direct political commentary.
Yeah, it's like about Hollow Earth or something. I don't remember anymore.
Like it's so much more about like just how fucking big Godzilla is. And like the Roman Emmerich Godzilla is trash, but it's very much about, in the way that every Roland Emmerich film is, it's very much about the little dudes running around while the big violence is happening.
Yeah, the little dude's trying to stop it while shenanigans also kind of ensue in some way.
Yeah, and something that I think Shin Godzilla does really well is focusing on the political minutiae that gets in the way of those political stories. Like I've heard Shin Godzilla described as like if Godzilla was in the cast of the thick of it.
I wish that was a real thing, though. I actually would love that as a concept.
Like you have Peter Capaldi trying to like do a swearing cursing thing to like Godzilla in a suit.
Yeah, no, like he's Peter Capaldi like goes off on like a really long analogy about like how big Godzilla's dick is or something like that.
Right. But like, I think part of the reason people resonate with that is every good big thing causing destruction movie, when they really work, you're getting bogged down in the politics because it's getting in the way of the emotional journey, and you feel that frustration in like a Kafkaesque way. Or probably really, or like a Corrieda-esque way.
Yeah,
where like you're trying to push forward with the emotional journey, and part of the frustration that makes you empathize with the characters is getting stuck in politics.
Yeah, and like the kind of like the very sort of tedious elements of the political aspects that, while maybe they couldn't be of use, can also just get rid of time that could be used to just finding a way to stop the thing causing destruction. But the thing I've always kind of found interesting, and sort of, I didn't probably realize it when I first started this podcast, but I've kind of realized as a result of doing this podcast for as many episodes as I've done so far, is that like mech and kaiju films are sort of kind of like in a conversation with one another in an odd way, because like more so than just specifically politics, like ideas about military are sort of like ingrained in both to such an extreme extent, because like I sort of see it as like kaiju films are like the creation of like catastrophe that cannot be like solved through military means or like kind of like imperialistic sort of tendencies. And then mech films are like, but what if we military escalated so hard that we could, though?
Right.
So
No.
like it is ostensibly like trying to one up one another in a certain way, and while like mech and kaiju films don't always like have like a concurrent like storyline, like I don't like besides like Godzilla having a Mecha Godzilla and stuff like Ultraman, when it's just like literally a fantastical creature somehow comes up and defeats the kaiju, it's like they never really are in tangent with one another, but they're ideas that are kind of like of similar ilk because I think Pacific Rim, even though I don't think it is that interested in ideas of like military specifically, is kind of like the perfect encapsulation of this, where it's like monsters came to our world, so we made monsters to fight them, ostensibly.
Yeah, Pacific Rim is more interesting ideas of like, wouldn't it be really gay if we piloted a mech together?
Yeah, what if we piloted a mech and held hands?
Yeah, yeah, literally.
Which, you know what? Honestly, I am 100% for that. And not just because I'm down for most of anything Guillermo, but because that as a concept fucks. But
Yeah.
regardless,
What
regardless,
if
I
we get
think,
under the kaiju mech?
yeah, it's, uh, I'm really going to be upset when we eventually have to cover Pacific Rim 2 on this podcast because that's going to be like 3 hours long.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for you.
I brought this upon myself.
Because there are enough like really bad kaiju and mech films already, but most of them like have a low budget charm to them.
Yeah, no, like even ones that like by all accounts are bad, I am more than willing to forgive because of the fact that there is entertainment value, something at least slightly philosophically interesting. I mean, like, God, I covered Son of Godzilla and I was still able to at least get a military analysis out of that.
Dude, dude. Godzilla's kid in that movie. He's so cute.
He's just a little baby. He's just so
He's so adorable.
he's just a little guy. And it's like even in the silly stuff, I think, and maybe that's probably why I started a podcast like this, is I think there's still like substance and things worth discussing, even when it is like, what if like a big lizard found like a three-headed monster on like an island that was like controlled by magicians or something. It's like
Totally.
it's like I don't know. History and context always kind of shine a bit of interesting thematic developments because, like, again, a movie like this with Chainsaw Dick finale, there's still like the Cold War kind of angle that you can take with why this film is the way it is in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. Like a chainsaw deck. It's another moment I'd have to turn it off for my kids so they could enjoy the rest of the movie. Just it's I just want to take like there's this famous um what's the word for like a story? There's this begins in A anyway. There's this famous story about when Orson Welles was making Citizen Kane and it wasn't cutting together. Um and one of his producers is like, right, okay, and he takes him towards this B movie Western. And he's like, look, you see the cowboys are going that way, you see the Native Americans going that way, and it cuts together, and you understand what's happening. And in that moment, Orson Welles understood the 180-degree rule.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say it's like I think I know what specific scene that's in reference to, possibly.
Okay, okay. Fair enough. I don't, but that's okay.
Mhm.
Uh,
I was thinking it might be the dinner scene because of
oh
the
yeah.
development with like how that changes by the end of it.
No, that is actually probably a very astute point. But I suppose like what I've learned more than anything to actually like being involved in professional filmmaking to the limited extent I have is that the really excellent, and I've seen this back when watching really highbrow movies. It's like the really excellent, the best shots you've ever seen are still only really great because they're relying on really basic principles.
Hmm.
Like it's just using them really well, and then it's fate from then on in, you know. It's like good rules of framing.
Yeah.
Like that's why so many really low budget films, maybe people who barely knew what they were doing, are so fucking good. So it's actually not that difficult to make a really good movie.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like if you know it's like it's ostensibly like if you're literate and media literate, you can probably be able to come up with something at least somewhat, good just by, working hard enough on like a story by
yeah,
itself. And I feel like film is also kind of the same way.
yeah, totally. Like I think that hits sort of what you're trying to say. It was like even the less excellent mecha and kaiju films, like they hit at stuff
Yeah.
because like you don't go into the arts without having something to fucking say. And if you are competent, it'll come out.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like a film like this also is kind of like a good example of that because, like, I mean, like Stuart Gordon stuff, I guess by most accounts could be described as like in the areas of sort of like very, very genre film-esque like trappings in terms of like horror and that sort of thing. But like Robot Jox, like, especially so because it's so niche of like a science fiction kind of genre piece.
It is worth saying his last three, four if you include a short film. That is, he made a 40-minute short film with a then unknown Elizabeth Moss
Ooh,
in
really?
2008. That was his final movie.
Oh wow.
But his last three or four films were all really dark dramas. And that was like the only time he worked outside of genre. But though that was a class stretch, including a David Mamet screenplay
Oh
with William
wow.
H. Macy.
Huh. I never would have thought that actually. That's really cool.
Yeah, but like he did Masters of Horror. He did Masters of Horror twice.
Oh wow.
Like you are right. He's a real genre guy.
Yeah, but like despite like, despite that fact though, like there's still like a lot of like as we are talking about like interesting kind of commentary and satire present within the story and just like ideas that are at least fascinating to think about as like, this was considered an idea that was dystopian in like 89 and now where we are now it's like no, I can see that happening actually for real and I don't like it. but
Yeah,
but like the fact that like and I think that's kind of like the thing that's sort of fun about like sort of slightly cheesy speculative sci-fi fiction is that there's always like a lot of stuff that's like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen in our lifetime or anything like that. But then there's like the little bits of like little kernels of truth that are kind of still present in there.
let me put it this way, right? I wrote my bachelor's dissertation on for people who know me, this is the moment you get to roll your eyes. It's fine. Um, I wrote my bachelor's dissertation on giallo films as a reaction to fascism in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I've heard it come up a couple of times since I read that dissertation, but before then, I hadn't really heard anyone talk about it, and I haven't heard any talking about it that predates that dissertation since. Um, and part of the reason that really excited me was like it gets into something that really attracts me about genre films, which is as soon as you distort reality, then everything becomes metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you play with not even fantasy, but a fantastical way of seeing the world, you're saying something by rolling the camera.
Yeah, just by that simple act there is kind of already something there.
Yeah, like you create a kaiju, the way you envision what that kaiju looks like, its design, what it does, that says something. They made H.R. Geiger made the xenomorph look like that, probably not for any conscious reason, but it washes out, you know?
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say it's like it's may not be something that's even completely clear to the person making it, but like, as it's not necessarily like death of the author, but more so like if there's something to pick up, the audience will probably pick it up, even if it is just, like even with like people who aren't like super media literate, there's like they can still pick up on like, hey, this is making me think of, like they look at the xenomorphs like, hey, this is making me think of a big schlong. It's like and you'll laugh, but then it's like, no, but like there's something there though.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, oh, I wanted to quickly discuss the visual effects, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the sound stages were huge. Like Star Wars levels big. Um, it uh, and I think something interesting just in the evolution of mecha films, but also action adventure films, is this film has a lot more edits and static camera than any other Stuart Gordon film I've seen. You think about Reanimate, you think about From Beyond, they are defined by bold camera work and big colors.
Mhm.
Uh, and you can't really do that in this movie because everything is green and blue screen and miniatures.
Yeah.
There's lots of blue screened matte paintings, and like everything is done with miniature work. And miniatures are gorgeous, by the way. Like
They're so good.
they're honestly, the special effects work is incredible, I think, in this movie. And the design is so incredible. Like that famous shot at the end of them bumping fists with the thumbs up. They've even bothered to put like a little bit of the circuit connectors from 80s computers onto their knuckles that
Yeah, I
form
love that detail so much. I was laughing when I first saw it, but I also think it just looks really nice.
it it's so funny. It's like awkward and clunky in a way that matches the Saturday morning cartoon
Yeah.
energy. Like all of the bits are made out of other bits.
Yeah.
Um, and this is something they really used to emphasize scale. Like with some part of the reason I've heard people talk about why Pacific Rim works and the way it does is um it's a technique that Michael Bay uses a lot actually, which is suggesting scale.
Hmm.
Like if anyone's seen, it's a really old, probably a classic vintage YouTube video now at this point, but the Every Frame a Painting video on Bayhem. Um,
Yes. Oh, I love that one so much.
it's so good, but it talks about this bit in, I think it's Pearl Harbor, where this man runs out of a building and looks off screen, but you can see planes in the background. And it
Yeah.
says what this man is looking at is thousands of planes that you can't see.
Yeah. Just from that simple suggestion of looking off to where the planes are rather than like, you can see the planes in frame, but it's like that's not what he's looking at. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, totally. And Pacific Rim does this really well, where it shows a bit of something in scale to something you know and can relate to. And it's the thing you know and can relate to is only in scale to a tiny part of the bigger thing
mhm.
that you can see. And Robot Jox does a very similar thing with miniature work. You have a lot of shots of someone falling down against a blue screen with a that they've clearly gotten a smaller shot, a closer up shot of a miniature that they're blowing up in blue screen next to the sky.
Mhm.
Uh, and the amount of work and thought that has gone into Robot Jox, I think is like it's on the level almost of the amount of less money, but the amount of thought that's gone into like the first couple of Star Wars movies,
Yeah.
or in the Thing, how every shot of the creature is a different setup, it's a new
Yeah.
practical effect for every shot of the creature.
Yeah. It's always in a way where like to kind of keep you on your toes and not feel like, oh yeah, every single shot that I see of this is like a stop motion kind of like animation or something along those lines. Like like depending on like the shot, it'll kind of change it up to fit the setup. And that was something that's it's kind of like with like Jurassic Park also, where you'll have like the shots of the T-Rex that are like the animatronic that are closer up, so it's more believable. But then like wider shots are like the full CG kind of stuff, so it can be more fluid moving.
Like Jurassic Park was 94, right?
3, I think.
Yeah, slightly after Robot Jox, and that was one of the
Yeah,
early lots of visual effects movies. I think there's what 193 effect shots in that film. I
that
might be
sounds
slightly,
about right. That sounds
yeah,
about
which
right.
is famously a really big amount, even though there are millions, probably thousands. I'm probably exaggerating, but a lot in modern day films.
Yeah.
And I think Bring Up Jurassic Park is really interesting and sort of germane to my point. Because Robot Jox has a slightly dated feel and a slightly Power Rangers feel because of the amount of the sort of laborious nature of the editing and the setup. So everything's a static shot to get an effect, then another static shot to get an effect, because we didn't have the technology to line up moving cameras and visual effects in those days. So it had to be still camera. Like obviously, like
Mhm.
I think now, if you wanted to say to a filmmaker, you can only use opticals and blue screens and models, and you can move the camera. He probably could because we have technology now. If you remember that shot in Sinister, the Scott Derrickson film,
Mhm.
where Ethan Hawke is walking down the corridor and the kids in slow motion are running out behind him.
Oh, yeah.
That was done practically through motion control cameras.
Yeah, I was gonna say like having the use of motion controlled cameras and stuff like the scene from like Blade Runner 2049 where like two people are essentially overlapping onto one another, like one holographic, one
Sure.
real in the moment. So like we can do so much stuff with like that specific type of technology, but also
Sure.
the
But
limitations this film was made in didn't allow for that probably.
right, but like motion control cameras have only recently caught up with what we can do with CG. And I think there is a sort of cynical aspect to it. It's like now we can move the camera in mech films because we have CG, but there's I wasn't even alive when Robot Jox was made, but I still feel slightly nostalgic watching it because it's
Yeah.
like there's no CG in here, and it is kind of clunky, but at the same time, man, when those robots hit each other, I feel something, you know?
Yeah. There's real like texture to it and real kind of like even in like the sort of slightly clunky stop motion segments, there's still like a sense of weight to it that like you I think like we talk about Pacific Rim and that's probably the best example of like emphasizing like the weight of like these big giant robots, but even then I don't really think it fully captures it like the way something like this does.
Well, but even then, like we got Pacific Rim like that because an author went out of his way to do that. Like
Yeah.
I don't like to say that that like an auteur director will take a genre film and like elevate it with their auteurness,
Mhm.
but he definitely I think had a vision and an ambition for Pacific Rim that was maybe slightly higher than like Roland Emmerich's Godzilla, you know?
Yeah, there was an intent not to be like we want to make a robot movie because like that'll do well box office wise or something like that. It's like I want to make a mech film because I really like mech movies and I want to make a mech movie
Yeah.
for myself.
He was specifically going out to like recapture that physical nature that was just sort of inherent in practical stuff that has been slightly lost.
Yeah. It's kind of like yeah, it's sort of like lost with the sort of advances in technology and just I guess kind of what's the phrase mistaking the forest for the trees or something along that lines. I don't know.
Yeah, cutting your nose off to spite your face, something like that.
Yeah, where it's like you kind of lose a lot of the individual details more so to just get the bigger picture of like, hey, they look real enough to be believable, even if they don't move as
Yeah,
believably.
yeah, and which is a weirdly Stuart Gordon-esque sentiment about like the permutations of technological advances that we don't foresee.
True. Yeah, that actually
There's
is very true.
there's this Ursula Le Guin book that I really like called The Lathe of Heaven, which I think anyone should read if they haven't. It's really short. It's one of the shortest of her novels. I even think it might be shorter than the Earthsea books.
To keep that in
It's
mind.
real good, and it's about this man whose dreams transform reality, and he goes to a psychiatrist to try and help him, and the psychiatrist thinks if he can influence this man's dreams, then he can improve the world, and it's influence and what he doesn't see is that because he has his own limitations on what's good and bad, then then the changes he makes combined with the things he doesn't see about the infinite possibilities of the dreaming brain that he can't control because it's got the Gordon-esque infinite permutations.
Yeah.
It's like the infinite chance combined with the fact that he can't see outside of his own morality system. He can't see the flaws in his own way of thinking in the way that very few people can. Um, it doesn't go very well.
Yeah, I could imagine.
And I think that is sort of at the heart of what Stuart Gordon is doing. And I also think it's somewhat at the heart of what we've done with CG.
Actually, yeah, I'd say so. It is kind of like it's a sort of it's kind of its own like I don't even think I necessarily call it like a Pandora's box necessarily, but just essentially like you have been gifted the infinite possibilities, but like what what do you do with it when it just isn't used for anything particularly meaningful or like resourceful with that like limitless possibilities?
Yeah, yeah. I've been incredibly pretentious whipping out a Le Guin reference. I'm gonna redouble my pretentiousness and whip out a Derrida reference. Um, there's a slight hauntology while watching Robot Jox. It feels a bit like walking through like a dead mall, you know,
Hmm.
like this sense of this thing that was lost that we never really knew, but it still, I think, haunts today.
Yeah, like it has like that kind of yeah, that nostalgia for like a type of stylization that like will will we ever really fully go back to it? I don't know, unless if we somehow like have a solar flare that like destroys like all technological like devices in the next couple of years. Which, you know, who knows? Who knows at this point? But also
Maybe.
maybe, who knows? It would be bizarre. I would like to think the solar flare only destroys like applications used to do CGI. So like everyone else is chill, but like it's just the film industry that got screwed over. Then again, that would leave like several of hundreds of VFX artists like out of work, unless if they all knew how to do like fucking Phil Tippett type shit.
Hey man, these VFX artists get like out of work every time like a new label or comes into practice. They're not treated very good.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like that happens. Like, hey, this isn't anything new. This was just like last week.
Did you hear that BioWare are having a new round of layoffs?
What you know, like I'm mad, but like I'm also not surprised. So you know, like BioWare is not it's one of those things where it's like what other industry could it have been? Could have been like fucking EA, it could have been like Steam or Valve, I mean specifically. It's like at this point, like, man, if we think like VFX and like the film industry is bad, like man, imagine working in video games.
Yeah, yeah, honestly. It's kind of sad that video effects artists and video game artists are treated similarly terribly because they're both looking towards the future in similar ways.
Yeah. And they are like, not only are they looking towards the future, they're like the ones actually doing like the creating the future for us. Cause like, you know, we we have Avatar, we have our big like sort of like fantastically like big intricate like designed CGI fairs. But like the thing is like James Cameron didn't do the VFX for it. The like hundreds of fucking VFX artists in like New Zealand were the ones who did it, you know. So like
Yeah.
it's yes, he is the creative force like giving the approval of it, but like, you know, there's people who are actually having to do the individual work, which I think is kind of a slightly Robot Jox esque kind of like sentiment because it is about like like
Yeah.
like it the main dude gives me like a strong like working class dude who has been given like the like somehow massive like role of authority by being Robot Jox. But like the thing is also he has like all the other people that have like helping him kind of set up like the Japanese scientist that's there that kind of like helps keep things together. And then you have Emmett Walsh type character who kind of fucks it up for everyone. And it's just interesting to think about it that way, where it's like like a lot of mech stories, you're always thinking about the pilot, but there's always like the people who like are like doing the on-site scientific work. But like,
Totally.
they're never really like major characters though.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
That's
like
so true. That's so
I
true.
I think like I really love the Japanese scientist character quite a bit because he's like everyone's kind of a little bit heightened and a little bit silly, but he's the only one that seems to be like taking this role kind of like just completely like seriously and straight.
Yeah, he's playing it so straight. And it's not it brings in some like aspects of traditional Japanese spirituality and philosophy without being horribly offensive,
Nah,
which is weirdly impressive for the late 80s.
yeah. And when I watched this for the first time, I was kind of worried that it would go a slightly like Orientalist route with like the cowboy guy being like, hey, he's up to some sinister shit, but then you realize no, he is actually the one that's up to no good. He's being a true American and employing those
Being a
Orientalists to
scab.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
being a scab, basically.
Yeah.
But like it is interesting. It is interesting that like because it's by all accounts it's like something that takes up like 3 minutes of like screen time in the film, but it's like it's interesting that it like takes the time to even like do that in the first place.
But it feels so like intrinsic to the structure of the movie. Like
Yeah.
it feels so intrinsic to like the vibes, to the sort of the cynicism, to the critiques the movie's making of society,
Mhm.
to like his arc ends with a guy in a big Texas hat doing a thumbs up saying "See you in hell," and then he jumps off the balcony. Like that's so contiguous with the tone of the movie.
Yeah. It's like it really is. It's also awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I
Uh
also like how he's like he tries to paint the Japanese guy as a coward by being someone who would have like killed themselves after having been revealed as a spy who wouldn't face up to the justice for what they've done. And
yeah.
then he fucking does the same thing.
Yeah, he does the same thing, but the thing is he's like, and I'm gonna do it in like the most like he's gonna do it with his pride, basically, because he does the thumbs up and jumps out, which
Oh yeah, he's bullshit. He's bullshitting, you
yeah.
know.
He's just such a wacky character, just in general.
Discount Emma Walsh.
Ah, God, he basically is. And you know what? Honestly, like even discount Emmett Walsh is like still really good in comparison to most things. So, I'll take it. But
Emma Walsh is forever a dystopian hero because he has the line in Blade Runner where he's like, without us, you're little people."
yeah, little people. God. Uh I always forget like just how long he was alive for because I remember when I was like I was probably like 16 at the time and
Mhm.
I had seen Blade Runner and enjoyed like, all the Coen's brothers things like that and I was watching fucking uh Adventure Time or something like that and then I was like, "Wait, he's the Cosmic Owl." I didn't realize
Yeah,
he was still alive.
he wasn't like a spring chicken in Blade Runner. He must have been around for
No.
a while before that, you know?
Yeah, like he was, he was kind of like been around for a while by that point and I was just like, but I guess it was just like, nah, he's just lived for like forever basically. It's like only
Mhm.
until like a couple of years ago that he like passed away, I think.
God, I need to rewatch Blade Runner, man. It's been too long, and now I'm thinking
I've
about it.
I looked at my letterbox pro thing and at my most rewatched films and Blade Runner I have seen 10 times.
My God, that's the amount of times I've seen Suspiria according to Letterboxd.
That makes sense actually. I could see that, but I
Yeah.
think I think uh
Actually, no, I tell a lie. I've seen Suspiria 12 times. A film I've seen 10 times is another sort of faux noir thing. Is a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the Thomas Alfredson movie.
beautiful, beautiful film. Also,
Yeah.
imagine Imagine like a imagine a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy-esque story, but with discount Emmett Walsh in this universe.
Oh no, like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy would only be improved with Emmett Walsh because it's all about fucking old guys being sad. Like,
It really is. It very much is. It is. It
yeah.
is. It is. It is like, man, I can't believe I did that shit, and that happened
That
20 years ago.
that is basically what Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is about, man. Like it's all about like these old spies being like, when Britain was a colonial empire, we were the shit, and now America's ruling the world, and we're just like singing the national anthem and pretending we're still important, and like we're it's a film about annoyed Brits petulantly acting out because Britain isn't important on a global scale anymore.
Now, if it had mechs in it,
Exactly. Can you imagine like Gary Oldman taking on Toby Jones in a mech?
it's they don't even fight. They're just having like the same argument in the movie. They're just in big mechs. They're just over like massive speakerphone.
It's just like intense contractual negotiation, but they're just in mechs. Like,
Yeah. Oh God. I mean, to be honest, that's basically a Hideaki Anno film. If you take out the existential dread.
actually, I actually think the central character does also speak to Robot Jox in Evangelion, considering he is someone who is reaching for those human aspects.
Mhm.
And the only way he can engage with his dad is through the mech fighting. So it's hard for him to sort of not feel like he was just sort of created to destroy robots in a mech.
Actually, yeah, that is very true. Because, like, yeah, like in Evangelion, Shinji isn't necessarily like a test tube child, but like he might as well be within like the view of his father. Because like the only use that he sees of him is like get in the mech, or I will basically disown you. And in Robot Jox, it's like it's obviously like they have these like ideas kind of like off to the start, but like yeah, it's kind of interesting that because like the whole conceit of it is almost like the like idea of like military ambitions as like inherently dehumanizing because like our main dude is like, yeah, I am good at doing the mech stuff, but like at my core I am still human. But like the whole
Mhm.
point of like humanity is beyond just the robot fighting stuff as we see in the ending. And then like we have the test tube characters who kind of like, this is the only thing I've ever known, this is my purpose in life. So like when they're faced with like humanity, it's almost like completely like alien to them.
Yeah, totally. Like they can't understand why he would stand down to protect people.
Yeah, like Athena is just like vehemently upset by that, and meanwhile kind of just ignoring the fact that like 300 people died. And because like probably from her perspective, in that is like, well, yeah, you did it for the sake of like, you know, well, you're trying to protect people, and that was like inherently a bad choice because you lost the fight.
Or even like when he comes back to save her, like the whole bit is that she can't understand his motivation to protect her. She thinks he came back for the money because it's a utilitarian choice.
Yeah, exactly. It's like basically like the act of like doing anything like altruistic is like seen as like, it's like a completely like pointless and maybe even like morally like questionable act, ostensibly, if it means like losing like the objective of winning the battle, which is interesting.
And you know what? To anyone who says it's heavy-handed, I think it's about the same level of writing as a lot of episodes of Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah. I watched a couple of episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation for research, and the one episode I did watch, its theme was so heavy-handed. I was just like, this was progressive for like 1995. Yes, but also, dude, I get it. I
Yeah.
understand. Please get on with it.
Oh my God. But yes, Robot Jox. Good film. I like it. I flawed, but I like it.
Yeah, it is flawed in a lot of ways, and it's like there's like a whole plot point where the main character gets like horse tranquilizer that lasts for like 10 minutes long, and it's like, man, I don't
Mm,
really understand the point of this,
yeah,
but
the
I get it.
structure could be better,
Yeah.
but it's got a robot dick.
It
Robot
does.
chainsaw.
Listen, it you find a movie that has a robot dick that's a chainsaw in it, and then we'll talk, all right? Bring
They're
that
all
onto
talking
the
about
podcast.
this new. They're all talking about this new manga, like Chainsaw Arm Man. I want to Chainsaw Dick Robot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's all about in the end. Is is what there's only two things in life worth caring about, and it's using weapons of mass destruction for land disputes in almost sports like ways and chainsaw robot dicks.
You get it. You see the vision.
I do see the vision. My third eye is wide open,
Oh yeah.
but I'd say that more or less covers everything I'd want to cover for the film. I'd say like my final thoughts are ostensibly that it's like perfect kind of like evening like cheesy kind of genre movie fare, but it is also like there's substance to it in ways that are kind of surprising even for its like cheesy kind of genre trappings. And also just for the fact that it's like probably like one of the first few instances of like American mecha films out there that I can really think of. Cause
Mm.
like, I mean, really the only two that really come to mind ever are like this and Pacific Rim anyways. So that might be a sign that it probably was one of the earliest instances.
I mean, like there's the Hugh Jackman film about robots that fight each other.
Oh yeah, Real Steel.
Yeah, but I
Directed
think
by
now
Sean Levy.
that's true.
Yeah.
But there's also the perennial series of Robot Wars where the small mechs.
Yeah. I was gonna say they're mini mechs. They're the little baby mechs.
Yeah, exactly. And the Mythbusters guys went on Robot Wars before they did Mythbusters, and they had their robot get banned several times for being too good.
That makes a lot of sense. I could see fucking was Adam Savage one of the people that did that?
I think so. I think so. All I know is that they never lost a match, but their robot got disqualified after 2 rounds because it so utterly destroyed the robot the bits would like fly off into the audience.
I can't believe they had to nerf the Mythbusters mech.
They literally had to nerf the Mythbusters mech.
God,
Yeah.
that's I'm gonna have to find that now because I actually like watched Mythbusters religiously as a child. I need to find that.
So Adam Savage talks about it in one of his new weblogs that he does every now and then.
Ooh,
So you go look that up. But I just want to end the main discussion of Robot Jox. Just but I know I've eulogized Stuart Gordon so much. The man did die recently. His autobiography is coming out soon. I think it might already be out. You can go get it. It's from Fab Press, who have done. They're a Guildford-based publishing company who have done so many great sort of they're like the Rhino Records of horror books, right?
ooh,
They take these underappreciated people and give them some respect. I have one of the books over there. It's a big hardback, going through the life and films of Lucio Fulci.
ooh! Wow,
Uh,
that's actually really cool.
yeah. So basically, Stuart Gordon was, by all accounts, a lovely, lovely man who never let himself and his art be repressed and kept reinventing himself and trying new things. Of course, he wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, of all things.
Oh wow,
Yeah, like he has done
holy shit!
everything he probably ever wanted to set out to do in films. And he's dead now, and it sucks. So rest in peace, Stuart. May your legacy carry on.
And if nothing else left behind, like a really truly like incredible kind of career, both as a genre filmmaker, but just as a in general, just a filmmaker.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And now, honestly, I'm after doing this podcast, I really want to watch more Stuart Gordon films now.
Please do. So many of them are good.
I need to see From Beyond actually specifically.
Yeah, it's my favorite one of his films. I think it's the least. I think it's the one that I think is the most like a normal film while still being very weird.
I can get behind both those things very, very much.
Yeah, totally.
Now,
It's the most coherent, is what I'll say.
yeah, that's fair actually. It's always fun to have like a director known for like their odd style and be like, all right, but like what's their most coherent story?
Don't get me wrong, From Beyond is still fucked. Um,
Fair. Very fair.
yeah, but sorry, carry on.
It is kind of I will say it is kind of funny that even his PG rated Saturday morning S cartoon has like a headshot
Mhm.
and like mass casualties on screen.
Yeah, totally. He has this Prison Break movie, that's also dystopian. That it does play a bit Saturday morning cartoon, but it also has this bit where they've just gotten across the bridge to the outside world, and then the laser shoots a guy in the chest, and there's viscera everywhere, and he's holding his guts in his hand, and there's like a cavity in his chest.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I need to find this immediately, actually.
Yeah, no, please watch it. It's good.
Uh, Now, with our final thoughts done for the film, we now get on to the section that everyone is always clamoring for, which is rate that mecha. Now, there's only really two though, so like it's pretty easy, but the thing is they're both kind of interchangeable except for one aspect. Now,
Mhm.
Achilles' mech is great and all, lovely. I would say probably like a pretty solid 7 out of 10 for me, and is a very great mech design in terms of VFX and just general design. But, but that being said, our villain Alexander has not only spider legs but the chainsaw dick. So a immediate 9 for me on that alone.
So I would say that in the opening battle, the American mecha, solid 6 out of 10. The Japanese guy makes some improvements to the mech over the course of the film that I think raises it to a 7 by the end.
Very fair.
And it, like teleports to space, like it's done pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, I would say with the Soviet mecha, um, early on, I think it is consistently a better designed mecha than the American one.
Mhm.
It can shoot fists that are not particularly controllable. It does kill 300 people. Um,
True. There's a very fair point.
yeah, it can shoot fists. Later on in the film, of course, it sprouts spider legs. Towards the beginning, I would say it would be like an 8 out of 10 if it can control where its fists went. In the state it's in, probably a 6, but it gets better as it goes on. And I think with the chainsaw dick, that's a solid 8, 9 out of 10 mecha.
It's actually funny. I'm surprised we actually basically gave the same ratings. That's like the first time that's happened on this besides the Iron Giant episode.
Oh yeah, well, who can disagree with the Iron Giant ruling harder than anything has ever ruled?
Yeah, you also see the vision on that end too. Uh,
Thank you. Yeah.
but with that then, that concludes our episode covering Robot Jox. Saoirse, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's been a delight.
You're so deeply welcome.
I'm not only just a great episode, but also very educational for my lack of knowledge of Stuart Gordon films. And after this episode, I am going to rectify that as best I can.
Awesome. That's what I'm here to do, man.
Yeah, your your mission is complete.
Yeah, literally. I'm a Stuart Gordon evangelist. One more of the cult.
A Gordonist.
Yeah, literally.
Well, thank you all for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and hope you all have a wonderful Mecha and Monster Monday. Peace.
It's a kid. There's some kid in the cockpit of the Gundam, sir.